And welcome to this week's edition of Talking Talks. I am Mike Ganino, and with me today, again, as always, of course, is DiVita, and we are here to talk about talks. And this week, I feel like I should have wore a tux, Chloe. We are going to be talking about the Oscars. Yeah, you look like you've got like a nice
I have a little bit.
You've got and a little statement necklace there, a little statement piece. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about making statements. We're going to talk about making statements with your clothes, making statements without your clothes, although not like without.
Not without any clothes.
If I had multiple friends named Chloe, I could make like a third joke with that, like statements with clothes. But we're going to be talking about the Oscars. That is what we're up to. It was the 92nd Oscars this last Sunday. And while the world has mostly forgotten what happened on Sunday, we have not. And people have discussed what they wore, what they said, what they were doing, who won awards, who didn't win awards, what movies you need to catch up on. And we thought, well, no one yet has talked about what lessons there are for public speakers, for presenters, for storytellers, for podcast hosts even. And so we thought we would come here today and share that. What do you think of the show in general before we dive into the specifics? What do you think of the Oscars this year, Chloe?
I really liked them. I actually thought especially the performances from freaking Janelle and Billy just crushing that opening performance, and the surprise Eminem performance, and just everything about the flow felt good. I didn't miss a host, and I thought freaking Steve and Chris did an amazing job. I love that I'm calling everyone by first names. I'm not
right. And actually, from my this is the first time we're doing a Talking Talks or any kind of talking from my office, my new office and video studio, and I can actually see. It's kind of cloudy, kind of smoggy, but I can see the Hollywood sign from here. So maybe we are on first name basis with Steve and Chris.
Well, I'm acting like it because they did a great job. I thought their opening monologue was funny. It was in the moment. You know, they brought in a lot of important details that we can talk about. But I think overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought people were on and engaged, and they felt very present, which is how I felt after the Grammys too. So it kind of had a similar end feel for me. What about you?
I was looking back at our texts. I disagree a little bit. Which is fun. I think we should disagree.
I like
people maybe watch and be like, they always agree, but we don't. Sometimes we have nasty, vicious fights.
I don't know if I'd qualify them as nasty, vicious. But
I know. And like the 4 years that we've been friends, I don't know that we've ever had a fight. But we do disagree. And one of the things I disagree with is I do think I wish there was a host. I wish there was a host. Yeah, I felt like every time we came back from a break, there was a hi, and here's who I am. And it was like every single time we had to have an announcement versus there just being the host on stage who we already know, who was there to kind of tie it together. I thought there was like a missing through line. And I guess I hadn't paid attention ahead of time. And when it started, I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. Janelle Monáe and Billy Porter are going to host the Oscars. And I thought, that's what I was excited about. I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to whip right into hosting. And so then later I was, and then I thought it was going to be Chris and Steve Martin, Chris Rock and Steve Martin. And then it wasn't them either. And I was like, oh, there is no host. I wish there was a host. I think there's a through line when there's a great host. And I actually think a ton of the presenters showed off why they would be great choices for hosting. So maybe next year we'll get Billy and Janelle, or maybe we'll get Steve Martin and Chris Rock, or maybe we'll get Maya and Kristen Wiig. Who knows? I don't know. I missed a host. Well,
so I don't disagree that it probably would have added something, but I didn't miss it. So I don't know. I had several glasses of wine.
The other thing I was looking back, because we're texting each other during these every single time we're texting each other. I think both of our husbands are always like, "Oh, it's your other husband going on here." And we were texting, and one of the things I saw over and over, both ways, me to you and you to me, was that we were saying it felt so honest. Everyone's acceptance speeches felt really honest. Even the presenters felt really honest when they were up there, and that was something that we also said about the Grammys. It was really honest. It felt like real stuff going on. And that was pretty cool.
And I think that's one of the reasons that maybe I didn't miss the host as much, is because I just felt more from the presenters, and I felt more from the event as a whole in that respect. And so it just, I don't know, kept me more connected.
Yeah. I definitely was connected. I just I thought it was strange sometimes when there was an announcer to announce the announcer who was going to announce the presenter who was presenting the awards. That felt weird to me. Like there were all of those people in the audience, which I also valued because it was giving people an opportunity who normally wouldn't be allowed to be on stage. So I liked the visibility that came from it, but I just thought it was strange when there was someone to announce the person who was going to announce. Just me. It's like, imagine a conference and there's an announcer who announces the MC who's going to announce the speaker. That was my thought. Okay, so let's talk about, we got to start, whenever there's an award show, we have to start with the red carpet. And what was really fun is watching the choices, because those people are making a statement. Like they're choosing the outfit knowing that people are going to talk about it, people are going to ask about it, people are going to photograph it. So they're using fashion to say something. What were some of your, I feel like an entertainment person. What were some of your favorite looks? But not because we liked the look, but because we thought it actually said something.
Yeah, and I think that that's important because when we talk about speakers and what we're learning from this, the reason these things are important is because we're leaders. We're stepping in front of people and expecting them to follow us. So the choices we make are important.
Right.
I think I loved that, like Jane Fonda, for instance, wore a repeat dress. She wasn't doing anything, you know, and that to me was an important statement because there is this, somebody said it somewhere, and I'm sure it's been said many times, but there's this sort of dichotomy that happens right now at these events where they're like, oh, we want to bring awareness to being vegan and the environment and all these things. And yet we're spending so much money on wasteful time and energy and outfits. And there's this, like, it's not exactly thrifty. And so I love that I love that women, because I feel like it's easier for men. And I know Joaquin Phoenix just wore the same exact suit to every single show this year. And I think that that's a big statement. That's saying, no, we don't need to like step in front of you to impress in a new way every time. It's about how we just show up regardless of what we're in, because we can look fabulous several times in the same thing. And I really liked that statement.
Yeah, and I liked even Jane Fonda. She not only wore the same dress, but she wore like sustainably harvested diamonds. So she made choices in everything she wore. I also I thought that Natalie Portman made a very clear statement with her cape, which had the name of all of the female director snubs as she saw it. So along the front of her cape were all of the names. And I thought that was a really great statement to make. It reminded me of Jennifer Nettles at the Country Music Association Award, the CMA Awards earlier this year. She wore, I believe it was Christian Soriano outfit. She had like a cape on over her like suit that she had. And on the back of it, it said equal play, because one of the issues in country music radio is that they just don't play female artists that, and in fact, Maren Morris was the first person since like 2005, the first female artist to have a solo #1 song on country music radio. And since 2005, and it's not because there's not good music. It's not a pipeline issue. And so Jennifer Nettles' outfit was all of these statements on it, but the big statement was equal play, which was really interesting because it was that tongue in cheek about equal pay. And I thought that was a really great way to make a statement as well, because you know that while you're walking the carpet, everyone's looking at your outfit. So use it to say something. So let's talk about, if you are a speaker or a presenter, or you're getting ready to go on television. Our shared friend, Laura Gassner-Otting was here in LA. She was a guest #1 on the Mic Drop Moment, my podcast. She was the editor of my book. We're old friends. She was here in LA and she was on TV, and she was sending me photos this morning of like her outfit, which was really, really awesome. If you check her out on Instagram, but she was sending me that. And it's like, we had this conversation yesterday over lunch about the choices we choose with our clothes say something to our audience. And so what are some of the notes you have shared with people in the past? And what are some of the notes you share with people currently around like what to wear when you're in front of people to send the right statement? Yeah.
And I think there's sort of a couple categories to think about, because there's the one that's just practical, like what is your background? What are the lights? What do you need to make sure you're not going to be distracted with? Like for instance, you talked about the statement piece. If I had a big light on me and this was a big circular statement, I'd be reflecting all over the place and that would be distracting. So there's those practical things, but then there's the more important, which is who do you want to show up as? And whether we believe that we can influence people just by how we show up, we do. you know, like how we do our hair, the colors that we choose, the style, whether it's fitted or not. Look at Billie Eilish. She's this 18-year-old girl who's like, I'm not going to be this little pop star who wears these skimpy outfits. Nothing against people who do. Everyone should be able to wear what they want. But like, she just has this, no, that's not me. This is me. And so she steps into it very differently. And it is her. It fits her style and it fits who she is, but it's different. She's a pop star. And if you put her next to like, you know, Taylor Swift, when Taylor Swift was 20, they're very different and they have they show up differently.
Or so, Ariana Grande, they're both out there right now.
There's so many, and it isn't about any one of them being right or wrong. It's just, you have to understand the brand that you are so that you can portray it properly, because you don't want to be the guy who goes up on stage in like casual jeans and a rock band t-shirt with a man bun if you're going to try to be all professional and serious.
Yeah.
Like those don't go together. And so you have to align.
And it's also the challenge of wearing something that not only like the audience gets, they look at you and they say, oh, I get it. But it's also the challenge of wearing something comfortable for you. Yep. And something consistent, because if you're on stage, even if you're at these shows, and I know that a lot of these outfits, especially for women, are not very comfortable, but even in that, I think finding something that you feel fits well, so you're not tugging at it, pulling at it, because we can read that. And I see that a lot with speakers and folks. They get on stage or they go on camera and it's not something they feel comfortable wearing. And then you can tell that they're pulling on it, tugging on it. And so yeah, sometimes you have to wear an outfit that like, no, would I wear a ball gown all the time? No. But can I wear a ball gown that makes me feel comfortable so that I'm not pulling at it and doing that? And I think that's where some of those folks get away with having a designer who really gets them. And that's probably why you see a lot of them wear the same designers year after year, is because the designer knows how to fit them. And we could do the same thing. I wear a lot of J. Crew. So for me, like this jacket I have on is J. Crew, this shirt is J. Crew. I know the sizes, I know how it fits, I like how it looks. And so I can kind of stay consistent with that. And that can be a certain brand, that can be a certain style, but knowing what you like and what fits you so you're not nervous is a really helpful tip, because if you're on stage and you're pulling, tugging, grabbing, or even thinking that like you're uncomfortable, or how do you look, or is my stomach looking okay, you're worried about the wrong thing.
Yeah. And the audience can tell. So absolutely.
We're really good at reading that.
Yeah. And you don't want to be distracted. Like that's not your role on the stage, is not to be thinking about other things.
Yeah, for sure. So we moved from the red carpet. People were making statements. People were making choices about how they look, how it fit their brand, what they were up to. Even Eminem, when he was on stage, he dressed like a 47-year-old Eminem. Like that sounds funny to say, a 47-year-old Eminem. Maybe don't eat that, but definitely listen to it. That was a great performance. But he was Eminem at the Oscars, you know, and I think that's where great brand comes from. And sometimes for speakers and authors, it takes a little while to get there, to figure out what does that look. I know for me, in the beginning, I thought there's some really old headshots of me with like glasses and very tapered or combed over hair with my shirt and buttoned in my jacket. Like, hello, I'm a speaker and you need me. And what I realized over and over was that what people responded to was my energy and how I made them feel. And so I said, okay, well, what does that look like? And that's how I ended up doing what I do. My website, my branding, everything fits that. So there's no reason for it to feel inconsistent. And then I know how to show up all the time. So let's talk about paying attention, because in these shows and in the red carpet and as we move, there's so much going on. It's loud, it's crazy. And that can happen at events. I mean, maybe you're on a podcast and all you can see is this angle, or you're on a video and all you can see is this angle, but maybe there's a lot happening. There's someone walking by. There's a dog down there. There's things in the background. If you're on camera, that's certainly the case. So let's talk about attention a little bit.
Yeah, I think attention's interesting because what you said, and it goes both ways. So on the red carpet, it's interview style. So both people have to be paying attention to each other and aware of what is going on that could be distracting. You know, there was one moment where Lily Aldridge was interviewing the two guys it was Dean Charles Chapman and George McKay. I'm spacing the movie they're from, but anyways, they couldn't hear her. They had this like awkward little moment of just this like, you know, like, and they leaned in like and turned their ear, you know, like trying to focus. And I'm not sure she fully picked up on it because she didn't change anything she did for them. They sort of adjusted a little bit. And it just kind of brought to light that idea that it's up to both of you. So you have to pay attention, whether it's one-on-one and you're doing an interview, it's a panel, it's your audience. You have to pay attention to how they're responding so that you can respond appropriately. And I think that whether that's commotion or whether that's just like, I was at an event once and I wasn't speaking, I was actually emceeing the event, and the woman on stage, you know, she's talking, whatever. And the service hall behind her, I swear they drove like a dump truck down it. It was so loud and distracting. And so she had to figure out in that moment, how do I respond to that noise? Because my audience hears it, I hear it. They actually can't hear me because of it, you know? And so she had to have this quick thinking moment. And to me, that's where attention comes in. If you're not tuned in, you're not paying attention, you don't know what's going on, it's hard to have those quick thinking moments.
Yeah, it's so easy to drift, to get lost, and then you can't yes and. I mean, that's essentially just like the basics of improv is really listening and listening to more than what's being said, but what's going on around you. And I think that's where you see some of the really great, the great hosts that are not hosts like of the show, but the great, you know, the red carpet hosts, or is they're able to manage all of that without looking scattered or unfocused. They don't get that dead look in their eyes of like, I'm asking you questions, but I'm not actually here with you right now. They're able to really be in all of it. And it comes off just so much more genuine and interesting. And it's better. It's more interesting to watch.
Yeah, because they're actually listening and responding and having a conversation instead of just shouting questions and hoping to get an answer.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that Billy Porter did so well was he was really just like, what's going on with you? What's interesting? And again, I think he's in a role there where his role was to be fun and entertaining.
Yeah.
I think Tamron had a different role. I think Lily had a different role, but he was able to do that, much like Sharon Osbourne at the Grammys.
Yep. But Tamron Hall, like, she was great because she was that person who had those initial questions to get a conversation going, but she didn't stick to some script in her hand. She really listened and then responded and had an actual conversation. It made it much more interesting than just sort of like, so what was it like making this movie? And what do you think of your co-stars? And, you know, I'm not trying to necessarily make fun of anyone's, but that's how it can come off when you just question, answer. There's not a lot of like depth to it. It doesn't get that interesting. And Tamron, I don't know if you noticed, if there's anything you saw, but I noticed a few things. I was like, this actually is interesting now. It's new information. It didn't just feel like the same old.
What was it like on set? We went deeper than that. You know, one of the interesting takeaways too for people that are doing some kind of speaking or communicating as a profession or in some way part of their job is that the line that connects is if you're on stage and you're doing a panel and maybe you're moderating the panel, a lot of times what happens is you have all these questions ahead of time and you get lost in asking the questions, and someone says something really interesting that's maybe connected to something that someone else said earlier, and you don't make the connection for the audience. And it's so easy to get into, I've got my questions, I'm nervous interviewing these people, I want to serve them, so I'm going to stick to it. Even with my podcast, I quickly realized that wasn't the point of it, was asking these certain questions. It was, how do I bring an interesting conversation that feels complete so the audience can learn something, grow, be inspired. And I think sometimes when people are hosting panels or even being interviewed on panels, you forget that and you think my job here is to ask a list of questions on the topic versus creating a beginning, middle, and end for the audience.
Yeah, it's closing that loop for them, you know, like pulling all the pieces together and making it be something that they can take away. Because I think you've talked about this before about the sound bites. Like the more you can make it a sound bite that people can remember, then it becomes more memorable.
And it's interesting. I was interviewed last week for a documentary that's going to come out this fall, which is really exciting. And Katie Martell is the producer of it. And so she was here in Los Angeles, actually here in my office interviewing me. And one of the things we were talking about, not on camera, but just casually, she was being interviewed on stage and in a panel type thing. And somebody asked, it was all, I think there were lesbian and gay men on stage. And the panelist asked what it was like for a trans person applying for XYZ job. And someone from the audience stood up and said, And this is a big issue. I get asked this question a lot. And it's like, I don't know. You should probably find one and ask them, but don't ask me, or go read a book or learn or educate yourself. It's not their job to teach you. It's not my job to teach you. And so what happened? Someone in the audience stood up and said, wait a second. I am not interested in anything any of you have to say. And it was a trans woman. I'm not interested in anything you have to say because none of you have any clue. So no, thank you. And Katie, really smart, really intelligently was like, here you go. You tell us. Because like you sound like you have some things to say and you know better. So handed the mic to the person, was like, you do it. You're absolutely right. Yeah. And I thought that's, again, great. Being in the moment and realizing what needed to happen, because if that's a question on the panel, maybe the audience really does want to learn. And so our job isn't to necessarily just stick to what the plan was of interviewing these 3 people on the panel. It's to get the audience what we promised them. And I thought that was a really great way to do that, was involve the audience member who stood up and said, hold on, I'll do, but you don't know what you're talking about. I thought that was really smart. So we go from outside to inside, and then the show begins. The Oscars opened, and I think in the very first few moments, the thing that everybody noticed was Janelle Monáe's white shirt. Her white button-up shirt had a button mid-chest that was open.
Yes.
I was so nervous.
I know. I would the same thing immediately when she came out. That was the first thing I said. I was like, oh no, her button.
Because you know what's going on backstage. They're dressing, moving, she probably had the jacket on, took the jacket off, rehearsed that bit where she did that. And she's probably doing that backstage, getting mic'd, getting things pulled. And the shirt just came undone and it's in the dark back there.
Yeah.
Nobody noticed.
And I wasn't sure she would notice. It's kind of one of those things that you don't necessarily, it's like having your fly down. You don't necessarily notice.
Guilty.
So I was like, right away, I'm like, oh God, but
I think everyone right now just checked their fly, by the way.
Yeah, right. And I'm actually checking buttons that you can't even see. So, but she did a move. I can't remember what she did, but in taking off one jacket to another, you could tell she saw it. And then it became, ooh, how's she going to handle it?
Yeah.
Because there's different ways. Like she could have had this moment of, oh God, and like made a thing of it, but she didn't at all. She made it smooth. She just kept moving. She did her thing. She found the moment where she just, was doing one button the other, and then it was something that we noticed, but it didn't actually become an issue or be talking about.
No one really talking about it. I mean, maybe just you and I.
I know, might be.
Yeah,
but it was because she was a pro, and she didn't have this I tend to have like extreme reactions to things. Like, doesn't matter whether it's like a squirrel ran in front of my car or like I think somebody's gonna die. It's the same. Like.
Driving Chloe anywhere is a frightening escapade because she sits on the passenger seat, and if she sees like a beautiful butterfly, she screams as if you're about to run over a child. Yeah, it's great.
Pretty much. So, but she didn't do that. She had composure and was like, I'm not going to actually react at all, but I am going to take a moment and correct and fix and make sure it doesn't become a thing. And it see that really well.
You see that happen to people where they something happens, the slide doesn't work, or they click on a slide. I saw this just recently. They clicked on a slide. It was supposed to be a GIF that moved. It didn't move. And then they pointed out the fact that it was a GIF that was supposed to move and it didn't move, versus being like, okay, just move on in your conversation. You draw more attention to it and make it an issue because it's your anxiety and your nerves coming out. The same way that when people's fly is down, they make a big thing of it. Like, unless your fly is down and your junk is sticking out, you can probably just slowly zip up, turn slightly to grab your water and fix your fly. You don't need to bring attention to it at all because now everyone's staring at your crotch.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's mostly just your own nerves. And it's like, how do you just stay in the game, zip up, move on? And when you see live musicians or you see Broadway shows, you see them do this so beautifully. There was a fun meme that went around that was like, Elsa at the beginning of the decade, and it was the Broadway production where she's going from one outfit to the other and she spins around and like it's a whole new like big dress. And then there was one at Elsa at the end, or I think someone said like me at the beginning of the decade, me at the end, and it's where she turned and the dress didn't explode open, and so she's like ripping off the thing but still hitting her like let it go, and she's like singing to the buttons. That's the professionalism that comes through. That's really, you're not worried about yourself. You're just taking care of the audience and moving on with the show. And Janelle did that so beautifully.
Yes. And that was the key, what you just said, that you're not worried about yourself. You're worried about the audience and carrying on with the show. It actually, one more example, because it reminds me of, I don't remember what year it was, 2017 or 18, where Joey Coleman keynoted Social Media Marketing World. And he had the clip, if you all remember, of the one reporter guy that's in the UK who's talking something serious and his son comes in the room and he has to like get his little toddler son out of the room and he's live on TV. He had that in his deck and in all the rehearsals and the sound check and everything. It worked perfectly. And then on the stage, the sound didn't come on. The video played, but the sound did not come on. And he could have made it awkward. He could have made it feel like it was the fault of the AV team. There were so many things he could have done, but what he did instead is acted out the voices of what was happening. And he made it a moment to be amusing.
Right.
And that's the opportunity you have when things go wrong, is it becomes, here's your chance to say yes and find a way to keep the show moving forward. Maybe it's making a joke. Maybe it's just making it not obvious and not making it a thing. But you always, every speaker at every point, no matter whether they're in front of one person or 100,000, is going to have an opportunity like that.
Yeah. And you're going to have an opportunity like that in front of a boardroom giving a presentation.
Yep.
You're going to have an opportunity like that as a listing agent, a real estate agent, sitting down with a family and going through, like, you're in someone's home, who knows what's going to happen. The more fluid, comfortable, and calm you can be, the better. That's what people really want, is how can more of you show up in this? And we're okay with all the little flaws. Yeah. It's interesting. So then we went on. And the other thing I think is really interesting is the idea of not only being ready for something like that to happen with your button popping off, but also really listening to what's happening in current events. And maybe you have a rehearsed opening. Maybe you have a rehearsed a speech that you give again and again. Maybe your presentation is the same one. I'm speaking in a couple weeks at the Council of Hotel and Restaurant Trainers, chart.org. I'm keynoting their event in Napa, which is amazing. So I'll be up there, and it's all restaurant trainers. And so a lot of times what they're training, what they're speaking, their public speaking is about giving new hire orientations and giving things like that are probably the same. I mean, I remember back in my days when I was in the restaurant world, I gave the same orientation hundreds of times. And so is there something that just happened that you can use? And I thought Steve Martin and Chris Rock did a really good job at that at the beginning.
Yep, absolutely. Just like we mentioned this at the Grammys too. Here, they made a joke. It was something funny, right, with the Iowa freaking caucuses and the app and the disaster that all that was. And they brought it in, which proves that they're professionals who can adjust, whether it was already written or they were working, whatever it was. They're like, oh, this just happened. It's current. It shows we're in it. We're paying attention. We're going to pull this into what we talk about. And it made it relevant. It was like a current, like that's not a joke that will work any other time.
Right. Yeah.
For the moment.
Yeah. And it's like, even that joke a week later isn't as funny.
Right.
I had a friend who was a writer at Saturday Night Live, and he said that a lot of times that would even be the thing there of like, in between last week's Saturday show and this week's Saturday show, especially during political season, so much has happened that the thing that happened on Monday is actually not even current enough for us to make fun of anymore. Like, we wrote a joke, we had a bit, we thought it was great. And now on Thursday, this other thing happened, and people would laugh at us and be like, why are they making fun of that? That's not even the thing. And so really staying current. And it doesn't mean that you have to change your whole speech, but it does mean, are there little things that you should acknowledge? And they might be serious things, they might be light things, but really realizing where's the room that I can deal with what is today shows a high level of skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I think was important about what they did, kind of taking a little away from world events and being current and moving into just what's acceptable, because there's so Jeff Bezos was in the audience, and they really, Chris Rock mostly, kind of like laid into him a little bit, made him a joke, kept on it, and it was funny because it was true, and because it's very easy to put somebody like Jeff Bezos into the butt of a joke, because they're so high up there, so well known, so wealthy, so their status is very high. So it doesn't even matter whether it was Chris Rock or I don't even know, anybody that we would consider to be even higher status as a comedian. The fact that they were teasing Jeff was only because you can't get higher status in the world than Jeff has. And so there's no risk in making fun of him. You can't do that the other way.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's just call it out.
Yes.
This thing and it's like a running theme with James Corden. So James Corden, and I'm saying this as a lesson, not to like take a hit on James Corden, because even though I can see the Hollywood sign right over here in my window, James Corden doesn't care who I am. So I'm not saying it for that effect. So James Corden and Rebel Wilson were in the movie Cats, which famously had just a ton of issues. But the play Cats was weird. So like people talking about how Cats was weird, like the play was weird. It was a cultural phenomenon because it was the first musical, the first play to ever have a marketing campaign or a brand behind it. It was the first one. I heard this the other day. It was the first Broadway show that had a logo. So like that very famous like Phantom of the Opera mask that we see, it happened after Cats, even though Phantom was a play earlier. So a brand was Cats. And the entire time you went to see Cats, I mean, you can see this in episodes of Seinfeld. They make fun of, oh, we're seeing Cats again, or someone's going to see Cats. It's always been weird. And so the movie came out and the movie was weird. So throughout the season, by the way, James Corden, outside of just the Oscars, has made fun of being in the movie, and not fun of it like his own, making fun of himself for doing it, but making fun of the quality of the movie. He made a joke about somebody said, oh, hey, the video came out that his car in Carpool Karaoke is actually being towed, which is, I guess I just live in Hollywood, so I know that like that's how it works. There's not really driving. That's far too unsafe. And so there was a video of it happening, and somebody asked him how he felt, and he's like, I can't believe that people find that more embarrassing than Cats. And it's like, you made a choice to do it. And in his mind, I think he says, oh, it's all fun and games, but it's really not. Because one of the things a lot when people ask about jokes, I always say a lot of things are on the table. What's never on the table is punching down. You should never punch down. You should always be aware of status. And if you are the one on stage, you have more status than the people not on the stage. So in this moment, James Corden and Rebel Wilson came out dressed as Cats, and they were giving away the visual effects awards. And Corden said, as cast members of the motion picture Cats, nobody understands more than us the importance of good visual effects, making fun of the people that made it. In that moment, I remember texting you, and I texted in that moment, and I said, ooh, not funny, not good. And you text me back and you said, why? Can you explain why? And for me, it was the punching down. You don't punch down. Like if you wanted to make fun of Taylor Swift, that would have been fine. You want to make fun of Jason Derulo for wanting a huge bulge on his cat, that's fine. But making fun of the visual effects people who ended up retweeting and saying, hey, I didn't watch this. But I'm sure that these thoughtful, kind people are saying, thank you for the 80 hours we worked per week to put a movie right before we got fired because the studio closed and we don't have a job because they're gig workers. It's just, if you have comedy, if you're putting a joke, if you're trying to do that in your speech, in your story on camera or in a podcast, the number one rule is don't punch down. Punch up all you want. Make fun of Oprah. Like you might make Oprah fans mad, but whatever. Like I just released an episode of the Mic Drop Moment with Ash Amberjay from the Middle Finger Project. And we make fun of all kinds of people, but we don't make fun of people that are lower status than us. We punch up, we never punch down. And I think again, like Oprah and Jeff Bezos can make fun of each other, but they can't really make fun of anyone else. Like that's kind of it. Like and J.K. Rowling and Warren Buffett, they can go sit around and make fun of each other all day. They should not make fun downwards. It's just not funny. Not funny. So let's talk about judgment, because making a right joke is a judgment call, but also as audience members we do. So let's talk about Zachary Gottsigan and Shia LaBeouf.
So I know that. Well, and when I first saw them, I was like excited. I'm like, oh, awesome. Like, great. They're together. This is going to be so supportive. And then as I watched how they engaged, mostly Shia engaging, it just got this like icky feeling. I don't know. I felt like he was annoyed, or I just felt like he could have been a lot kinder. And I didn't know the background, right? I didn't really know enough about the background. So I immediately made a judgment about what I thought he should be doing. mind you, I'm not the one who's on the stage. I'm not the one in front of all of those people with all of the lights. None of that. But I did. I was like, wow, I just completely made a judgment. There were gaps in what I knew, so I filled them in with my judgment, and made a story around it for myself. That Shia was being a jerk and he could have been so much better. Why would he act like that? And then later, you mentioned something too, when we were texting about that. You said something, I don't remember what you said, but you said something about it. And I said, this is just reminding me of how we create stories. And as people on the stage, if we leave gaps in the things that we talk about, we are allowing our audiences to fill them in with whatever preconceived judgment they have, which means they are now finishing, creating, adding to whatever it is. They're doing something to the story you're telling them that you didn't intend.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what happened there, and what it brought to light for me, because come to find out, Zach's mom, like the next, maybe even that night, but definitely the next day, was like, you all have it wrong. Shia has been amazing. He loves my son. They get along. He's been so supportive. He wouldn't even present the award unless Zach could go with him.
Yeah.
Like, there was all this other sort of context that I didn't know when I made that judgment. I still watch it and feel like like you said, he's just kind of a weird guy. Shia's just kind of a weird guy.
This is a weird person. This is just an interesting guy who's doing his own thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I also think I was looking at it again, and I think there's, I feel, and I think this is probably a lot of maybe how he lives. I don't know, but I feel like he probably just really didn't care about the audience. And he was really trying to take care of Zach. He was really trying to help Zach have his moment. And it's that moment, like when I'm not a parent, but I can imagine how this feels. You are a mom, so you can speak to it, of like your kid is doing something. You're like, get it, nail it. You got this. And I feel like that is what Zach was doing, was like, come on, baby, you're going to nail it. You're going to have your moment. And I think that for Shia, he just was probably like, I'm not even worried about, I am not worried, because I think he's someone who's not super worried about his own fame either.
Yeah.
And I think he was just not worried about that audience, not worried it was the Oscars, not worried about the people at home. And I think he was like a parent who's like, my baby's going to, like, this is my guy. I'm going to take care of him. Like, don't anyone, like, come on, man. And I think when I look at back, that's how it feels to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, there's something about it that's amazing that that story didn't leak beforehand. I actually think that's quite commendable for Shia.
Is surprising. And I haven't watched it again. I should go watch it again, because I did read a few people thinking, like, being annoyed at Shia because they thought he was laughing at Zach. And I never had that. I never felt like he was laughing at him. That was never a part of what I felt like. I felt more like he was a little bit annoyed it wasn't going as smoothly as he wanted it to. But to your point, it could have been coming from the place of just wanting the best for Zach.
I think you should go watch it again and then report back and tell me if my big brother parent vibe is right there, of like, it's like, oh, yes, you're so close, get it.
But it definitely, like, just made me realize how important it is to really give your audience, and this is different, right? He's a celebrity. He's standing on a stage. He gets the chance to have the whole world know the full story afterwards.
Yeah. When
you're making a presentation or a pitch or taking a stage, whatever it is, you don't usually have that opportunity. So it's up to you to tackle it immediately.
Well, and this is where I think a lot of people don't think about their bios properly. Mm-hmm. Your bio is not about, it shouldn't be about like bragging about your credentials. It should be about setting it up so the audience gets why you're there and what they can learn from you. Yep. It should alleviate the need for you to do any like superfluous, like who I am stuff at the top of your speech, because that's the job of that. It helps create the story for the audience in the same way. And the same thing about, you have to be really thoughtful about jokes you make or things you think might be funny that the audience doesn't get, like making a joke about a waiter if you're in an event where there's table service and you think it's a joke that's funny and the audience feels like, ooh, punching down. You're on stage, even if you're not getting paid, you're on stage. This is a waiter, you're punching down. So is your joke, which is actually meant to be really nice and thoughtful, is there any way it could be misinterpreted by the large amount of the audience? Someone's going to misinterpret it. We show up and people misinterpret us, but is it overall going to send the wrong message? And that's something I think as speakers, as communicators, as presenters, we have to be thoughtful about. When do I make an aside, a little joke, a little move that the audience might pick up and say, oh, I'm misunderstanding the intentions there. Yeah.
Know your intentions. Absolutely.
Everyone out there is judgy. No. Actually, I was thinking of this because, which is funny because we're saying watch what you do because everyone's watching, and now I'm about to say that's not the truth. I was thinking of this because I went this morning to CrossFit, and I'm becoming one of those people. You know, I make the joke of like I made the joke in the podcast episode this week with Ash Amberjay that I live in LA, and so I do CrossFit. I'm a vegetarian, and if I just started selling like essential oils, or I started selling selling some kind of product like that, Beachbody or Shakeology, I would be the perfect trifecta of like a person in LA who talks about all those things. So I was at CrossFit, and I remember at the beginning feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go because like I haven't been working out and I don't know if I can do it. And I don't know, like when it's time to like lift a barbell, I'm seeing the weights these people have, and mine is like the bar with like a balloon on the end. That's how much I can lift. And I remember I was talking to my sister-in-law, Mia, who is very fit, and, you know, she, cause she works at it. She's not, you know, she didn't just wake up. She works really hard. And she was saying with me, we were joking about like, we think that, and then everyone else there is just worried about themselves. Everyone else there is just worried about being crushed under that weight. Everyone else is probably worried about what everyone else is thinking. And we do that. And we do that on stage too. We think that like, oh, 4 days later, someone's going to be worried about this thing I did or that thing I did, or did I say the proper word, or did I miss a line, or did I move my hand in the wrong direction to signal the future? And the reality is they're not. Right. What they'll remember is like, what was the feeling of that? And did I get something helpful? Did I waste my time with you? Or were you helpful? And did you give me something to think about? Did you force me to make a decision in your talk? And if you did that, there's all kinds of things. There's all kinds of different speeches and different talks. We talked about this when we talked about TEDx and the thousands of talks you were watching as you were doing research, and all kinds of different performers, all kinds of different styles, and all of it works as long as you're honest, thoughtful, and trying to be helpful.
Yes.
And that's where you don't need to make little jokes that might distract.
And I also think, so judgments, distractions, we've talked about all that. One of the things I saw that leads us into something else, which is, as a leader, something else you do not need to do is apologize. Because when Diane Keaton, when she was up there co-presenting with, is it Keanu? I just remember her holding the card, and she goes to open it, and she like couldn't open it and hit the mic, so there was a sound. A normal reaction for people, especially women, is, "Ooh, sorry. Is this apology for what happened?" And she didn't.
Right, as if you commit a crime.
Yeah, she was just like, "Oh, here, you do it." And she kind of just continued and moved along. And it was such a small moment that her choice was to not apologize. And she may not even have realized it. But when it happened, I literally sitting there watching thought she was going to say, "Oh, sorry." I just was expecting that. And she didn't. And I think that's a big takeaway for leadership, being in front of people, especially women, because for some reason we tend to do that more often. I find myself doing it all the time and thinking, why did I have nothing to apologize for. There's no sorry in this. But it's just this go-to, and it's a little bit more of insecurity versus confidence. And really what we need is the confidence.
And it's related. I think it's related back to what we were saying at the beginning about Janelle Monáe in that moment, just turning around, fixing the shirt and moving on. It's that same thing of if something happens and you need to make a joke that like a waiter drops a plate and you make a joke that feels like punching down. It's often just your anxiety and your need to fill space versus just moving along, like not pretending like it's not happening. Like if someone is throwing plates at the wall over and over, you need to address it. If someone drops a plate, it's you good? You okay? All right. Just like Diane Keaton did, and just like Janelle Monáe. That's sometimes the trick. There's a really famous moment where Scott Stratton, one of the I think everyone's favorite speaker, and everyone I think who he's just a fierce kind of friend to people. He was on stage and like fell off of the stage. Like he stepped up and there were stairs, I think, where he didn't think there was going to be stairs, and he fell. He just immediately got up and went back to doing his job. Like didn't pretend it didn't happen, but also didn't take 3 minutes to talk about it. And he shared that video, so I feel comfortable talking about it because he shared the video and made fun with it. But sometimes we fill the space because we're nervous and anxious, not because the audience needs us to. What the audience probably needs is for us to keep going, like Diane did and like Janelle did.
Yep, absolutely. Wow. Okay.
Let's talk about the 3 big awards. Let's move on to Joaquin, Renee, and Parasite. So let's talk about Joaquin's speech.
Yeah, that one was, it's funny because if you remember, we were texting and he wasn't who I wanted to win. Not that I didn't think he deserved it, but to me, I was like, ooh, who is going to get up and give the best speech? That's literally what I was thinking. Who is going to get up and give the best speech? And he wasn't at the top of my list. And he completely surprised me because he made it a time to use his voice. And I wasn't sure that he was going to do that. Whereas like we've talked about Michelle Williams, like she's so good at using her voice in those moments. And Renee did as well in hers. But I loved, and I think the buzz coming from Joaquin's is a couplefold. One, he found a way to make a lot of the issues and a lot of the passions we have feel more united. Because he said, it's not about this one or this one or that one. It's the fact that we're all fighting for injustice. And that to me was a way to unite and not have to feel like he had to address too much specificity, even though he did give an example in the pet space, which of course, I like. He reminded me why I don't eat dairy. And then his heartfelt honesty in that, ending with what his brother said and how, like, you could feel his feelings in how he spoke. And to me, that made not just the message, but him and how he delivered it feel even more impactful and why his speech got the most buzz afterwards. Still.
Yeah. It was, it seemed honest and thoughtful and prepared. He knew what he wanted to say. That goes back to like, I've said this before. I did an episode of the show, of the podcast about it, where I talked about like, we don't need to find our voice. I feel, I don't feel we need to find our voice. It was with us. We've had it over time. And I think the challenge is less that we need to go find ourselves or we need to find our voice, and more that we need to get rid of everything that's not us. And I feel like in that moment, Joaquin was just being Joaquin, and he was sharing what mattered to him and what was important to him. And so he didn't need to find what he cared about. He didn't need to find his voice. It was trusting your voice and being willing to stand on that stage and use it. And I think that's what we need more than anything, is especially today when we're transitioned to like talking about speakers with this. We don't need, if we want 7 hacks and 5 tips and 5 steps and all these things, we can go get a book. We can go, we have, the internet, we can find in 5 seconds, 780 different ways to start a speech if we want. That's not what we need these days. We don't necessarily need the information in a speech. And it used to be that you would hire a speaker, you'd go to a breakout because you needed the content. I get paid really well to give a keynote speech. There ain't a thing in my keynote speech you can't get from downloading the guide on my website. Like the Storycraft guide that's free on my website, like that's basically the content of the speech. But what you can't get there is everything else I put into the speech, my point of view, my perspective, my unique voice around why having a story and being able to tell it matters, that you can't get from a workbook. And I think that so many speakers feel and pack their talks with the how-tos, the 7 steps, all of this, because they feel their value is in information, and it's not. The value is in the uniqueness of it. It's in you being able to say, I have a unique perspective and I'm going to share it. And I think that's what Joaquin did so beautifully.
Yep. Yeah. And it's why people connected, whether they bought all of it or not, or, whether they're vegetarians or vegans or whatever. That wasn't his point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it actually segued. It's almost as if you were watching this in the future, you would think that Joaquin and Renee somehow were best friends who had prepared what they were going to say if they won together, because there was a great message in hers, because she also talked about being united as well. So Renee won for Best Actress for her role as Judy Garland in the movie Judy. And she was very Renee. She was Texas and soft and Southern. And again, I think there's also this pressure for speakers and storytellers to get up there and be perfect. And it's not. I mean, Renee is stumbly and said a lot and did all of these things, but she was her. And that's what works so beautifully. So she went through and did like her standard list of names, who to thank, her manager, the people in the movie, all of these things. And then she ended with this. I'm just going to read this quote. She said, "This past year of conversation celebrating Judy across generations and cultures has been a really cool reminder that our heroes unite us. They inspire us to find the best in ourselves. When we look to our heroes, we agree, and that matters." She listed Neil Armstrong, Sally Ride, Dolores Huerta, Venus and Serena and Selena, Bob Dylan, Scorsese, Fred Rogers, Harriet Tubman. So not only did she list all these people, she also like gave a nod to the films of the year too, which I thought was really thoughtful and smart. She then went on to say, "We agree on our teachers and we agree on our courageous men and women who serve, on our first responders and our firefighters," which we do. We believe in all of those people as a community. And when we celebrate our heroes, she said, we are reminded of who we are as one people, united. And I thought, wow. And also how beautifully packaged with Joaquin's speech, even though they probably aren't friends and didn't talk about it and didn't share, and were speaking from their own truth. And I thought that was a really beautiful message that she delivered there too.
Yeah, it was a night of beautiful messages, because even when you take it to the next one, which is Parasite winning, and just the first foreign film, like there was so much like humility in them stepping on that stage and accepting that award. And I mean, there's so many cute photos of, like just holding the Oscar and just being like, oh. And it was so honest and so just surprising. I loved how at the end, I think it was Tom Hanks who started it, when they tried to turn the lights off, the whole audience was like, what are you doing? This is such a moment. They were so connected to it. And so they got to come back up and have a little bit more time, which I can't imagine if they hadn't done that, what would have happened. But it just, they were not even in the same language, so honest that even if they didn't have a translator, we all were like connected.
Yeah, it was, and I also loved his choice of his translator, because people throughout the thing were saying it was his translator, and he corrected them and said she's a director. So the woman that was translating for him was actually a director, and she wants to make a movie. This is actually a really cool story that happened. She wants to, and people would call her translator, and he said, no, she's actually a really intelligent, smart director. And he made a choice of using her for this. And she said she wants to make a feature film about the awards season. She wants to make a movie. And because of being at the show, she has a ton of producers who said, great, let's make it. Let's do it. We want to do it with you. So that was cool. I also thought it was really great because, again, we're in a world and we're trying to change, and we got a lot of work to do. None of the actors from Parasite were nominated for Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting at all. And so the film that went on to sweep the Oscars with so many awards, including Best Picture, none of the actors got nominated. And so I thought it was really great when I think he won the Best Director award, and he had them all stand up and said, let's hear it for these people, because they're the ones who made this happen as well. Because it was a bit of a snub that none of them got nominated, even though the film was nominated for everything.
It just was everything about it was just so raw and honest and real and in the moment. And it just felt like my whole takeaway, I guess, at the whole show is just, if you can step on stage with that much honesty and feeling connected and showing up fully, then the audience is with you. There was one moment where I think it was Tamron Hall was interviewing Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, and they were talking about how there's a table read online that you can go and watch of them for The Irishman. They were doing a whole table read. They put it on. You actually do a lot of those. They're quite fascinating. There's a lot of them from shows and Broadway shows and movies and TV shows. You can go watch table reads.
The one from Superbad is hilarious, by the way. Yeah.
Well, Tamron was complimenting them on how engaged they were in the table read. And Al Pacino talked about how it's different now, that they don't have the rehearsals that they used to. And so the table read is the place where you get as much as you can. And then you really have to trust your director to catch you. And to me, it made me think about how no matter how much time you have to put in to work on whatever you're doing, whatever your pitch, your presentation, your board meeting, your talk, whatever it is, if you are confident enough in just what you're saying and connected to it, then your audience is going to trust you. And it's that trust that catches you when you're in that space. And so that, to me, that kind of, I felt that through the show.
Yeah. Yeah, it felt really, and it goes back to what we said at the beginning. It was a really honest night all the way through. And it's all the way to the end. I thought you mentioned when Tom Hanks and Charlize, they were the two I noticed in the front row, like, get up, turn the lights back up. And Mickey Lee is the woman who came out. She's the producer of Parasite, and she's like a media mogul in Korea. She opened the first like multiplex movie theater. She is like an heiress to, I don't know, she's worth like $4 billion or something like this. I think she's like related to Samsung some way, but she's super wealthy. And what she said about the end of like, this night may not have, I don't know what this means for Hollywood, this film winning, but I know what it means for Korean filmmakers. And I just thought that was a really cool message, following what Renee said about Heroes and following what Joaquin said about having shared interests in what we're doing. And I thought like, that's a good way to end the show, those three.
Yeah.
Fun. Well, and on that note, I think that's a good way to end this show.
It is, for another nearly hour that we've spoken.
Nearly hour talking about talks about the Oscars and what public speakers and storytellers and people giving presentations can learn from the Oscars show. So if you're just joining, go back and see what we think, from the red carpet to the awards, to the presenters, to the hosts, all the way down to the speeches that folks gave here at the end. We shared all of our takes and what you can learn as a public speaker from those moments. And we'll be back next week with another Talking Talks. We will be actually next week live together. We'll be here together. So we'll be in the same place. So that'll be fun. We won't have to like stare. It'll be weird. We'll have to figure out how to look at each other in the camera.
In the set.
That'll be new.
Ooh.
I don't know. We'll sit over here like on my couch.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. That's it for this episode. We'll see you all later. Thank you.
Bye.